Welcome to the Living Ageless and Bold podcast. Each episode, I bring you amazing women who inspire, educate, and share their experiences and journeys along the way. So grab a glass of wine or a cup of coffee, find a cozy spot, and let's relax and have some fun hearing what can be accomplished after 55. Hi, everybody. Welcome to this week's edition of Living Ageless and Bold. I'm really excited about this week's guest. Judy Mandel is a former reporter and she's a marketing executive. And at the age of 50, she gave it all up to write her first book, become a full-time writer. And it's her award-winning memoir called Replacement Child. And it has become a New York Times bestseller. And when you hear the story, you'll understand why. She has another brand new book out called White Flag that came from a deathbed promise that she made to her sister. And she's just a brilliant storyteller. And I'm really excited to have her here to share her journey with us. So welcome, Judy.
Oh, thank you so much. That was a very kind introduction. I appreciate it. I appreciate it.
Well, writing a book was probably not on your mind when you started your career in marketing. So I always like to share how the story evolves, like how you got to this point now. So let's talk a little bit, and your story goes back to your childhood.
Right. You're right. I didn't think I would write, especially this book, the first book that I wrote. And it came from, notes and newspaper articles that especially my mother had left me. And when she passed away, I started to look through all of the things that she left me. And it was the story of, how the family survived a plane crash and she lost her 7-year-old daughter. And the story of my other sister, Linda, who was very badly burned, and what she went through in her life.
Did you know any part of the story prior to your mother's passing and leaving you this information?
I knew there was a plane crash, but it was always called the accident because nobody talked about anything back then.
Right.
Maybe they still don't. I'm not sure, but I think we talk a little more now. So I didn't know much. It took a long time for the details to come out. So it took a lot of research for me, first of all, for that actual event. And then, discussing with my family. And although my parents were gone by then, I couldn't ask them, but there were other members of the family I could ask. And my sister Linda was still alive while I was writing the book, so I did speak with her a lot. And so, there were a lot of things to uncover, and understanding even just air travel. This was in 1954 that this plane crash happened. Even understanding what plane travel was like in 1954 was an interesting journey. Sometimes when you're writing, you dive into the research and you get kind of lost in it, and you put aside a lot of research. I must have used, an eighth of what minuscule amount of what I researched in the book. Even for a couple of sentences, you do all this research and you find out a lot of stuff. So if you ever want to know anything about airplanes in 1954, you can call me.
Okay. Maybe that's another book.
Yeah.
Aviation from the 50s.
Aviation from the 50s, sure. And the interesting thing, too, was it was a series of plane crashes in a matter of months in Elizabeth, New Jersey. So that was interesting in itself. And I wasn't actually sure about, which plane crash this was. It turned out it was the one in the middle of that time. But, they closed down the airport, and people were afraid, they're being invaded and all of this weird stuff.
And talk about, so the plane crash, your family wasn't actually on the plane, correct?
No, the plane crashed into their building. And they were in a small 3-family building with a candy store on the bottom. And it crashed. It took off the top of the building. So the third floor was completely demolished. They were on the second floor, which, was set on fire, basically.
So, and I'm curious because you're saying this and it's bringing back a memory when I was probably 3 or 4, so early 70s. Mm-hmm. And in my aunt and uncle's neighborhood, a plane crashed into a townhouse. And the little girl was at school. She was probably kindergarten or first grade. She was just a little bit older than me. And the parents were killed when the plane crashed into the house.
Oh my. I have to say, every time I hear about another plane, crashing into a neighborhood, it really does, chill me still.
Yeah. And still obviously I was a little girl and I still remember that story.
Sure.
So it stayed with me forever.
Yeah.
So this happens later in your life. I mean, you kind of lived your life not thinking too much of it. Right.
Not paying attention. But, kids know everything, even if you don't talk to them about it.
Yeah.
And there was always an undercurrent in my family. This plane crash happened before I was born. I think I neglected to say that. But it was before I was born. And I actually was born to replace that sister who was killed.
Well, that's what I was going to just say, let's talk about the title of your book.
And I'll tell you the truth. I didn't even register that until I was maybe a year into writing the book. It took me 4 years to write the book. And about a year in, I started doing more research into grief, and especially grief for parents who have lost a child, and came upon this term replacement child, which was something I had never heard of, and it started a whole new path for me to look at this story in a different way, and I think really to understand that it was my story. Because before that, it was everyone else's story. It was my sister's story. It was my mother's story. It was, everyone else's story because I wasn't there. But really, it was my origin story. And that was very enlightening to me. So as you come to find out that there are a lot of us out there.
That's actually probably a good thing, though.
In different ways,
That you can talk to other people.
And kind of found a community of us that is our replacements in some way, shape, or form. It can be, from an adoption, it can be from a miscarriage, it can be from any kind of loss. So it's kind of fascinating.
Did you ever feel growing up that, did they ever compare you to your sister? Did you ever feel you were a replacement child, or that you were born out of that wanting to love another child, but you because you didn't know about it really till you dug into it?
Right.
Did you have any sense of you were different? It was different with you than it was with your sister?
Well, it was different. It was very different with me, especially with my father. It was very different with me than it was with my sister, who had survived the fire and the plane crash. So why I felt certain things, I had no idea. But I believe I did feel that especially from my father. My mother was very loving, and I think with her, it was, to have another child to raise and love. And I never felt, that I was second best or anything with her. But with my father, I did. And I think that journey of writing through this story helped me understand him also. And, the book is, it is about grief also. It's about grief, and it's about forgiveness, because I, had to forgive him it was very hard for him to accept another child. It was very hard.
Wow.
So.
Wow. And that's an interesting thought, too, of how much did your father love your mother to give her another child? That's what she needed. And he didn't know that he could deal with that.
I mean, I heard him say, I didn't want to tempt fate and have another child. That it was just, I had heard him say that. So, and he had a completely, in a family, I don't know if you have siblings, but even with siblings, you have a different life story. You have a different relationship with your siblings and your parents, and it's a whole different story. So comparing things, when I went and talked to my sister about it, she said, "Oh, Dad wasn't like that." But, he was to me. So it's a different story for each person in the family. It's kind of fascinating that way too.
Oh, it is. My father-in-law passed away recently, and at the funeral, they encouraged people to tell stories. And I have two kids, and my daughter said to my son, she goes, "Yeah, just remember, Grandpa Russ used to always give us $20 every time we came to visit. He'd sneak it to us." And my son said, "What are you talking about? I never got $20."
Uh-oh.
But isn't that fun? I mean, it's just
Sure.
he had a special place for her, and that was his little thing with her. And you don't realize these things until you get older and uncover the family dynamics.
I mean, I kind of realized that you don't start understanding what happened in your life until you are 50.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're 50, but
no, I am late 50s. Well, that's why I started this podcast, because of exactly this. This is a story. There are so many stories that you do have to get to a point in your life where you had to be brave enough to do it, to be able to uncover everything. You could walk away from your career, which we'll talk about in a minute too. But I think at this age, you're different. You hit 50 and it's, you don't care as much what people think. And hey, I got to figure this out, or I'm going to do this, or I'm confident enough in what I might find that I can do it.
It's a perspective too that you don't have when you're younger. I'm a lot older than you. I'm 70, but you do get that perspective of looking back and seeing what actually you went through and what it meant to you and how you got to where you are. And I think before that, you're so embroiled in the everyday, striving for your career, graduating college or, master's or whatever you're getting, that you don't look back at that. Most people don't anyway. Most people don't get to that until they're, I'd say, seriously, at least 50.
No, and I keep hearing 60s are even better. So I'm like, okay.
There you go.
So how did you know? So you have a career, you grow up, and maybe there's a little inkling in the back of your head that something was a little different, and you said, your mother had passed, but to leave your career, to say, okay, I'm going to start writing. You weren't a writer. You're like, I'm going to write a book, and you got a master's, right?
Yeah, I did. But the funny thing is I did quit my job, and I realized that I wouldn't be able to write this book unless I had the time and the time when I, could focus on it. So I did that. And, with the blessing of my husband, which was wonderful. And, but I didn't go back to school until after that book was written, which is very funny. And so I did write another book, but it going back to school was something I really had wanted to do.
And that's fun too.
It was a great experience.
When you go back to school in your 40s, your 50s, your 60s, when it's on your terms, not this, I have to go. It's a lot more fun.
Yep. And you go and you take what you want, and you with the teachers you want. And so it was a creative writing master's, which was great.
That's great. And now New York Times bestseller. I mean, that is, I'm an author. I know what it is to do that. I mean, that is such a rarity. It's so
even when you say it, I still can't even believe it. So
yeah, I mean and people listening and watching, if you don't know this world, it truly is such a minor percentage of authors that could ever even dream of it. And so huge congratulations to that. That's unbelievable.
Thank you.
And I'm sure you got a lot of incredible responses and feedback from other replacement children that now there was finally a book.
I eventually, connected with especially these two other replacement children. Rita Batat is one of them, and Christina Shalinsky, who's also a psychoanalyst who is part of our group. And we formed a forum online, and we've done, seminars and webinars. And Christina still treats people who are replacement children. And so, it's and some people don't realize until they start talking to us what this is about. which is fascinating.
Well, I didn't know, and I'm trying to remember how I found you. I saw you somewhere and I started, I don't know. I'm always looking for fascinating women over 50. So I'm constantly looking at people that interview people like us. I read about it and I had never heard that term. And I thought, oh my gosh, wow.
Well, we even have, the website is still up. We're not engaged in it as much as we were, but it's replacementchildforum.com. You can tell people.
Yeah. And I always say in the podcast, if one person's listening that could benefit from something that we talk about.
And there's some very famous people that identified as replacement children too. That,
really?
Van Gogh was a replacement child. He was a fascinating story. His brother, you might know this story.
I don't.
His brother was named Vincent Van Gogh and had died, and his tombstone was, right on their property where he could see it all the time with his name on it. Wow. And maybe that was some of the origins of his issues. You never know, but it's an identity thing too.
Sure.
It's, trying to find your identity is a very, big feature of someone with, who's a replacement child, trying to figure out who you are and how you fit in.
Yeah. What was your relationship with your surviving sister like? Because I'm sure as she got older, she had survivor guilt.
I think she probably did. I wish we had talked about it more. She did pass away right as the book came out. So I didn't get to, we didn't get to do anything with it together. And I had given it to her to read. And I said, if you want me to change anything, I'll change anything you want. And she said, no, this is your story. It's not, I'm not going to change anything. And she gave me, descriptive things that I was asking about. I was trying to describe our house, things like that. She helped me with that. And we had a very good relationship. It was, I was a little overprotective. She was 5 years older than me. But I kind of felt like the older sister, to be honest. I felt protective of her. She was badly burned and scarred. And so when there were reactions from children, I would be the one, trying to protect her from that.
Leave my sister alone.
Yeah. Leave my sister
you have no
alone.
idea.
Which of course I couldn't because I wasn't always there. Yeah. But it was how I felt about it, that, I wanted to protect her from it. So that is the kind of relationship we had. But it was, a very loving relationship, and I miss her. I miss her a lot.
I'm sorry.
Wish I could talk to her. So.
Well, you can.
I do.
Yeah, I was going to say, you can, and I'm a big, I lost my dad a long time ago, and we talk. I talk.
Yeah.
He's listening.
Hey, sometimes they talk back.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
So let's talk more about your sister, because you did have a great relationship with her, and your next book, is it out officially, White Flag?
Yeah.
Okay.
It came out last year.
Okay. So that's the story of your niece. And
it is.
Let's talk about, because I am certain that there are people listening and watching who have been through this exact story. And
it's a through story. I mean, it is a through story from, the Replacement Child book and the accident and what my sister went through. And I don't know if this is kind of a little wonky to talk about, but generational trauma is certainly something that I believe was part of that story of White Flag, the story that I just finished. And you don't often think about that, but when you're not there in a family, when things happen, it comes through both in personality psychology, but also in biology, which was some of the fascinating research that I did for White Flag. A lot of the research was done with generations of Holocaust survivors, and not just psychologically being overprotective and what you would think, but there are it's not a gene, but it's the way genes are. And I'm not a scientist, so it's it's a little bit. I'm trying to just say it the way I understand it, which is the way genes and hormones interact can be an inherited feature, and certainly with trauma, with generational trauma. And I believe that's part of the story with my niece who, became addicted to substances. I actually like to say, substance use disorder is what SUD is. I like to say that more than addict, because that's such a charged term. It has so much stigma to say addict. But she did suffer with it, and she was a lovely person. And
she was smart and right. I was going to say, talk about her personality and how she did in
she
school.
Was funny, and she was loving, and she liked to fish. She liked the outdoors, but she was great. She was great. And so White Flag talks about what happens. I think everybody that has someone with substance use disorder, they say, well, what happened to this person? I just don't understand. Why why do they have to do this? And why can't they stop? And that's, the crux of what I wanted to find out. And that was the question that I had when I started writing. And there are a lot of answers. There are a lot of answers why. It's not a matter of willpower often. It's much more intricate and complex than that. But, gratefully, there are things, especially now, even since, and I'll give away the ending of my book, my niece did pass away. But even since then, there's been so much progress in medically assisted treatment that helps people, and more treatments that are available. Back then, it was very. She died in 2017.
And how old was she?
Ago.
No,
it's not that long ago.
How old was she?
So she had been up and down, and she had been well for 10 years. She had been in recovery for really about 10 years. And I believe it was when her mother passed away that, she started to slip again. Yeah. And anyway, what I'm trying to say is that there are complex things that people might want to be aware of. And, I always say that if anybody gets anything from my book, it would be to understand that these are still the same people that you love. That even if they are, have substance use disorder, they're still the same people, and they deserve your help.
Oh, absolutely. There's no question. Yeah. And we had friends who lost their son to that, and he'd been clean. Like, he was so good, and he moved away to Colorado and went out one night and slipped, as you said, but slipped thinking he could go back to what he had been taking in terms of amount.
Yeah.
And we've heard stories of celebrities doing the same thing. They've been clean for a while. It's like, oh, well, I used to do this, and they take that much and their body can't tolerate it.
That's why when people come out of prison or jail and they've been, clean in prison, if they are, and like you say, they come out and do what they thought they could tolerate, and they cannot. And now fentanyl, of course, is another, another horrible part of this. So,
horrible.
Hopefully, the treatments will keep getting better and being accessible, and praying for that it keeps going in the right direction, and people can find help.
Yeah. What is your hope with White Flag?
I think that people see that it's something that is very complex. And to look at the reasons, and I think for empathy and to understand, like I say, this is the same, son or daughter or niece or nephew. It's the same person. They have, even though it's very hard to look at that when they lie to you and they do things that are hurtful and harmful, and you have to protect yourself as well. I'll say that. But just to understand that they're the same person and they deserve the love.
What's one piece of advice you would give to somebody? I mean, your niece, you lived with her for 42 years, and you did the ups and the downs. Are there signs that maybe if you catch them early enough? Like what advice would you give somebody going through this that maybe they can prevent this outcome at the end?
Well, one thing I would say is, you want to trust them, but you have to verify that what they're telling you is true. So trust, but verify, make sure it's the truth. I mean, I'm sure there are things when she was in real trouble that I didn't verify, which, haunts me that I didn't do that. But I wanted to trust her, and I had always trusted her. And that was, that's a hard part. So I think that's the biggest advice I would get. Don't stop loving them and retreat, which is what many people do. And I've had people talk to me at book events and things, and they said, well, I did everything I could, and then they went back on drugs, and why was that? It wasn't worth it for me to do all that. Well, you have to keep trying, or because if they pass away, there's no going back. So, and if you didn't do everything you thought you could do, you will never forgive yourself for that. And so that's what I'm saying.
And recently, last year or so with Matthew Perry, and when he passed, and the more you read about it, and it was like, here's this guy who had everything. I mean, come on, it's friends. And he himself so desperately wanted to not be an addict, and he couldn't do it. And this is someone with all the resources in the world. He had money, availability. He could do anything, and he couldn't stay clean forever.
Yeah. It's very sad. That's a very sad story. Yeah. I think of people like Philip Seymour Hoffman, and he was probably. What I think about him is he was very smart, and he was using certain drugs to help him recover, and then he would go back on the drugs. He would go back and forth. He was almost too smart for his own good, I think. But that was very sad. I mean, what a loss also. Sure.
Yes, so many. I mean, it really, and so again, many. If these people that have the resources to help themselves can't do it, I guess what I'm trying to say is if you've gone through it and you couldn't help, if you did the best you could, like you said, if you love them, sometimes it's all you can do.
Yeah. Well, I take solace in the fact that I know she knew I loved her. I know she knew that. So that is, a solace for me.
Do you have any other, I mean, obviously these were two big passion projects, basically your memoirs. Yeah. I hope there's no other big story like this.
No, fiction. Maybe I think short fiction, maybe will be my next thing.
Maybe a fun children's book.
I think maybe I'll make it up. Making things up might be a good idea at this point.
Well, but sharing your stories for, again, to, the replacement children and people who, I think drug addiction touches just about everybody. We all know somebody. It might not be a direct family member, but we have friends or friends' kids or siblings, or we've all been touched by it, sadly.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think that's very true.
And if we can help.
That was my hope, is that it helps some people have a new perspective. If White Flag can show just a few people that there's a different perspective to look at it.
Yeah.
I'll be happy.
Well, thank you.
I have gotten letters from people, so I'm pleased that it has touched people and helped them look at it a little differently.
And that way you fulfilled your wish to your sister.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Wow. So I just changed everything. I used to ask my guests the same two questions at the end of the interview. I just had my 100th episode, so I'm changing it up a little bit. No, it's all good. But you said you're 70.
I am.
What? And going through what you did and writing your book in your 50s, what would you tell your 40-year-old self? If you could give yourself one piece of advice for back then, what would you tell yourself?
I would say, don't be afraid to do whatever is your dream. Don't be afraid of it, because you only get this one life. You only get this one chance.
Isn't that the truth? And that's
that's what I would tell myself.
Yeah.
But when you are 40 or 30 or 20, you're operating somewhat on fear of what's going to happen, and planning, and sometimes you don't take that chance.
Yeah.
So I would say, be brave.
I love that. I love that. And where do you see yourself in 10 years?
Oh my gosh. I hope I'm right here.
Yeah.
Maybe writing something and looking out my window, which I have right in front of me.
Oh, I love that. Well, Judy, thank you so much. Where can people find your books? I mean, obviously, I'm sure they're available everywhere.
Yep,
but
they are available wherever you can get books. And I hate to say Amazon now, but they are on Amazon. Any bookstore will carry it. You can go to my website, judymandel.com, and see links to where to find them. So it's not hard.
Great. Yeah. And if you all listening and watching know anybody who could be in this replacement child situation, or if dealing with a friend or family member, somebody they love who's facing drug addiction, these are two amazing resources and books from somebody who's lived it, who might be able to help you through it. So definitely check that out. Share the episode with everybody. And Judy, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you. Thanks so much. This was very nice talking to you.
Thank you for listening or for watching this episode of Living Ageless and Bold. If you haven't already, please make sure you hit subscribe. And if you like the episode, I hope that you will give us a great review. You can also head over to livingagelessandbold.com and sign up for information, inspiration, and exclusive opportunities for us, women over 55. Thanks for listening. And remember, no matter what you do, keep living ageless and bold.